Hi, this is Tim at Love Change Grow, and this is the Winter Solstice Masterclass, which is discovering the new you. And first off, let me say, by the end of this, you're going to have a different understanding and perhaps perception of what you are and how to become the new you. So that's my promise to you. And so let's just dive in. Um, I'm going to basically use a few metaphors. One is the tool, and the second one is a movie script, and the third one is gardening, which you're probably already familiar with. Um, so let's just dive in. Um, we kind of understand our world, most people do, is at least from psychology and that understanding, everybody knows what the ego is. And the ego is a tool to interact with people, to get our needs met, to negotiate, navigate around in the world. Okay? So one of the first little metaphors is a fish bowl. Okay, we got this little fish bowl here, and there's all kinds of little fish around in an aquarium kind of thing. And each fish has an ego. And some fish are, they just want to swim at the bottom here and, eat algae and stuff. Other folks want to swim at the top. Some are kind of mean and predatory. Others are they just want to build a nest and have a happy little life and things like that. So you can kind of think of the world as being in a fish bowl, and you are one of the fish in it. Now, sometimes you want to be a big fish in a small bowl or a small pond, and other times you want to be a little fish in a big pond, and there's all kinds of fish in the ocean. So that's one way to look at how most people kind of understand the world and understand their ego. And the ego, like I said, is just a way to kind of swim around and get your needs met and have a life of whether you're like a predatory fish or a happy little productive fish or one that just kind of wanders around in the fishbowl. So you can also think of the ego as being a mask. And we all have different masks that we use. I'm the dad mask or the teacher mask, the counselor mask, the employee mask, the manager mask, and we put on different masks according to what we perceive is going to be a good way to interact and get the things done that we need to get done, that we're supposed to be gotten done. That's our responsibility, is to learn how to do that. And, certainly in child development, parenting and stuff, we try to teach and become familiar with how to use the right mask at the right time for the right situations and that. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. And I hope a lot of this will make pretty intuitive sense to you. So the deal is with the ego, when we're swimming around, if we have a lot of stress or overwhelm, or it could be that a fish here is, attacking us, or maybe the water has become too cold or too warm or something, we kind of get overwhelmed and freaked out and go, oh my gosh, what's happening? And when we get overwhelmed, one of the basic things of the ego is to survive. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm under threat. Do I need to fight? It's the primarily the three F's, fighting, freezing, and fleeing. And so the ego's one of its jobs is to maintain and try to maintain survival. Now that means social survival or the role I need to survive as a manager. I need to survive with my reputation and things like that. And so, under under stress and overwhelm, the ego kind of goes into this reactive thing. It's very reactive, and it's reactive to the situation that it finds itself in. If the situation is pretty happy, pretty like, yeah, I got this, everything's copacetic, things are happening how it's supposed to be happening, the ego is happy. It's like, yeah, okay, we're having a nice time. Um, if things are generally doing fine and they're well within the coping mechanisms, and it's surrounded and supported by the environment and things like that, and we have a job to do, well, the ego goes, okay, I need to be logical, coherent, and have my little logistical hat on, and we got to tick off the boxes A, B, C, D, and make things happen. And that's works. But if something isn't working, a little piece of our logistical plan isn't working, we kind of go nuts for a while, or go, oh my gosh, I got to figure out something. So I think you all kind of understand, in a sense, the ego is a tool. And being a tool, it's like the ego is a hammer. It's like the ego in and of itself has this narrow little job to do, and it's in some ways doesn't have much of any will or any initiation on itself. It has to be used by your person. Oh, I'm going to build something, and so I need to hammer some nails, or I need to tear something down, and so I'm getting my sledgehammer, hammering it out, and doing a demo job kind of thing. So inherently, the ego doesn't have much ability to decide. It's the person holding on to the hammer that gets to decide how to best use it. Now, let's say a kid, you have a 3, 4-year-old toddler, and it has its little plastic hammer, and it's banging on things and, creating a bunch of racket, a bunch of noise and all that. And that's all fine and good. They're learning how to use their hammer. Now you take somebody that's, say, 30, 40 years old, they can have their real hammer, okay, and they can make or build something quite exquisite out of it because they have experience. They have this hammer that they intend, and they can tap on a chisel, like Michelangelo, he was a craftsman, a master, an artist, and he said, look, the statue of, I think it was David, is in this block of marble, and I just need to release that, and I don't need to carve or chisel out David. I need to chisel out all the stuff that isn't David. Okay? And so that was one way to use the hammer and a chisel and release something that was inherent. Okay. The other approach is you have a hammer and you're building a birdhouse, and it's a nice, elegant little fragile birdhouse, but you're just tapping it. And sometimes you're building a big house and you have your proper hammer, a different hammer, let's say, an actual construction hammer, and you're pounding nails, you're tapping, the studs so they're vertical and stuff. So you can think of the ego as merely a tool to get a job done, to create something. But inherently, the hammer really doesn't have the ability to intend and create. it needs somebody to be able to master using the hammer, master the way to use it to create something. So in a sense, the ego is just a tool. And it's again like a mask, Oh, I'm going to put on this ego mask of being a dad, of being a husband, or, all that kind of stuff. So really, the ego is empowered by your intention, by what you want to create or not create or destroy or get rid of. So, when we look at ego that way, we're looking at really what is the meaning and purpose of the person that has the hammer, okay? And the meaning and purpose, meaning is really about what is the direction, what do you want to build, and purpose is really the motivation, what motivates me to use this hammer, this ego. And so on, a deeper self, we learn to master the tool of the ego. And in this fishbowl, if we're a master fish, we can swim around and do our purpose and get our things and needs met. And in a sense, we operate in this micro environment of the fishbowl. But we can learn to operate in a larger environment or a smaller environment, a warmer tropical fishbowl versus an Arctic fishbowl and things like that. So the nice thing is the ego, and along with meaning and purpose, is fairly adaptable. Let's see. So the other thing that the ego tends to do, that we tend to mistake ourselves as the ego. We tend to go, oh, since I have this intimate relationship of this hammer in my hand, I start to think this little hammer, this ego, is myself. And I forget that, it's actually two separate things. I have my meaning and purpose, my sense of self, and I have this tool which I begin to think, oh, I can do things with. And the ego and the self, our purpose, our motivation, becomes one and the same. And we're taught this from the day we were born, in a sense. Our egos, our sense of self become, whether you were dressed on the day you were born in a blue onesie or a pink onesie. And so we start to, at least on this planet, in this world, we start to be identified by our sex, male and female, by our race, by who we choose to say, this is my gender these days, and realize this is also all embedded in a culture and a language. And since we have different cultures and different languages on this planet, we tend to go, oh, well, I'm Christian. I was born in the United States. I believe in freedom and God and the Constitution. But in another country, you have a different language and a different you're embedded in a different culture with different values and different meanings. Okay, and so that ends up becoming the old kind of socioeconomic class idea. Certainly people in the United States automatically, because they're born in the United States, have a certain, generally the potential or their statistics, they're going to do better than a large part of the population in, say, India or things. And say a person born on the beach, born on the seas and the ocean, they're going to generally be swimmers and fishermen, versus a person born in Nebraska is not going to ever eat much fresh fish except for some catfish and bass and things like that. So our environment, whether it's a physical climate environment, class, culture, societal environment, we're going to learn different things. In a sense, we are products of our environment. And you can see this all over the place, such as, I grew up in Nebraska. There was no such thing as skiing or snowboarding. And I come out here and I go, oh, hey, this looks easy, And so I tried to snowboard at 44, and I just, I saw these little 4 and 5 year olds zooming around. I go, hey, this looks easy. I can do this. But because I had not been brought up that way, I just beat myself up. I eventually learned how to do it, but I will never be as fluent of a skier or a snowboarder as a person that grew up in that environment and did that every weekend with their parents. So you can start to see that due to one's cultural, environmental, family influences, we develop different identities because that's what we're taught. And so in a sense, you can look at the ego and these different identities as different clothes you can put on, similar to the mask, different masks that you put on. And these masks or clothes are not really you. They're just accoutrements, our clothing that we learn to use to be able to swim around in this little fishbowl. Now, if we were in an Arctic fishbowl, we'd have a little bit different clothes and a little bit different sensibilities. Ultimately, a lot of folks, and there's been a lot of things written about, is that we eventually come to a point where we really associate and connect our sense of self, our sense of ego with our body, our physical body, whether male, female, whatever race and all that. And so there's this deep connection between our sense of self, our ego, our tool that we use, and our body. And not all bodies are created equal, per se. All of us generally have a heart, a liver, some kidneys, 2 eyeballs, a couple ears, and a mouth. We all kind of, have those functional things as being a human being. But we are all kind of have these different potentials. The whole thing in the past with the whole Darwin idea in genetics is that we come into this world, we have a certain genetic makeup, a genetic potential, and then our environment, between the interaction of our environment and our genetic potential, we become this being. Now, some beings have athletic genetic potential, and they're great athletes. Other people have more of perhaps an intellectual academic thing, and they're great students. Other people may not have education or athleticism, but they are really great at what they do. And so part of this environmental socioeconomic class thing is, if you were brought up on a farm and maybe you didn't go to school and stuff, but chickens, cattle, how to build a fence, you didn't have to go to school. And through experience, you develop these skills. And at some point you go, yes, I am a farmer. That is who I am. Versus another person, say, went around and followed their mom all over the place. And, this mom single parent and stuff. And mom ended up having a a daycare in her home, a licensed daycare, and ended up taking care of kids. Well, that person, male or female, being in that environment is going to learn the skills of early childhood caretaking and things like that. So I think you get my point with that. And back to the physical body, generally, we view our being as our physical body and all its characteristics of eye color, hair color, skin color, and all that. Okay. But behind or making your body work is really consciousness and awareness. And generally, when we get in developmental kind of ideas of age development, once people get to 14 to 21, we develop a sense of ourself. Hey, I'm my own individual self. I can do what I want, and that can, on a parental thing, can be challenging. And there's some little tricks about that. And I'll probably do a master class on some of that too at some point. But, when you look at all this stuff that we generally class in the big thing called ego in our culture, is that, it involves a physical body, an intellectual mind, feelings in our heart. And also there's this thing called spirit. And, spirit is I don't want to say it's just religion. But it's more like, it borders on the line, really a mishmash in most people's mind between philosophy, metaphysics, religion, and spirituality. And so, in a sense, we're now in a bigger fishbowl here of meaning and purpose, of consciousness, of, well, why am I here? Why did God put me here? Or what is the reason for being on this planet at this time? Why am I here? What am I to do? And those are huge, huge questions, but they're also really important questions. And by starting to engage your awareness, your consciousness, asking those questions, you start to be in a bigger fishbowl. So now the bowl is like this, okay, and these little parameters of our own little comfortable fishbowl become like this, and now there's redfish in here, and they're swimming about and all around, and then we have some green fish, and all that, and so then it's like, okay, where do I fit in? How do I make things happen? And so, so then we start to really, this is our little ego here, but it's expanding and it realizes, oh, I got to learn some new things. I got to figure out this bigger fishbowl. And so, in a way, things like physics and sort of our biological life, whether we want to look at it from chemical interactions, neurotransmitters, from anatomy and how does the body work, whether it's a psychology, are we dealing with concepts, are we dealing with neurotransmitters, are we dealing with receptor sites and things like that. Now then, when you get to think about the metaphysical, spiritual kind of things, philosophy kind of things, then we're looking at kind of the idea of, well, are we a part of universe? Are we a part of source? Do I have a piece of God? Am I God? Do I have a piece of God in me? And so those are deeper kind of questions where now, instead of talking about neurotransmitters, we're talking about, kind of why am I here? What am I doing? What do I want to do? What is a larger in a sense larger, but also on the other end of largeness is the intimate self. Why am I it's really a sense of your intimate self is asking your deep inside self, what am I doing? Who am I? And in that, um, really part of what I want to get across today is that understanding of your intimate self that nobody can see, nobody really knows about, is how we kind of orient ourselves to this larger fishbowl. And in doing so, then we really start to question, who am I? And what's my meaning and purpose? And what do I want to do about it? And meaning and purpose is well, let's not go there right now. I don't want to confuse you. So when you get into, universe, source, God, that becomes a very kind of esoteric, mystical, ethereal kind of thing, which is, on a spectrum. Over here you got the physical, and it goes over here to the spiritual kind of thing. And in between here, we have culture, we have class, we have, neurotransmitters, and all this. And it's just different ways to divide or to define or contain our sense of self relative to being able to discuss or learn or investigate, relate to our experience. And so if you just say, oh, it's spiritual, well, we're kind of containing it over here. If we're saying, hey, this is neurotransmitters, we're over here. And maybe ego is right here, And so we have a wide, huge space on one hand to say, this is who I am. On the other hand, we can immediately focus it down to ego or down to a receptor site in a neurotransmitter, or expand it up to, hey, I have a piece of universe, a piece of God inside me. And so that is one way to kind of look at self, and that is way beyond the ego. And when you have this expanded sense of self, the ego really becomes a tool, so to speak. I had to take notes here. So one of the interesting things is we now have, the old world kind of idea of the view of the self was that we are merely parts of dust, parts of carbon that came from the interstellar galactics, where, so this little carbon and the earth having some water and sunlight, then we start to grow, and we started out as in this little soup, and the little soups ended up figuring out how to become DNA, how to work, and the little DNA came to be randomly selected to become, fish, and then, amoebas, plants, fish, mammals, reptiles, mammals, and now, then chimpanzees, and now humans. I mean, that's kind of an amazing idea, really. And it took millions of years, probably billions of years, to have that happen. And so, with the whole idea of that we are products of our environment, at one level we are a tabula rasa, a blank slate. And so we have to be taught all these things to be able to participate, become a person that has a meaning and purpose. And that's really like, man, that's a lot. Well, there's also now, I'd say really, the past, well, for quite, you could, time is arbitrary in a way. You could say in the past 10,000 years, or, since the chimpanzees, and then, we get to the whole idea that 2,000 years ago or so, Jesus said, oh, hey, brought in a new level of awareness. And so now we have this new school that is really unfolding. And in the past, I've been sort of studying and wondering about consciousness for the past 50 years or so. And it's just been an explosion. It's been really, I think it's fascinating. And I continue to be fascinated. So this new school thing is that, we're evolving from this kind of carbon-based existence to now we're kind of thinking of our existence, our ego, our interaction is energy-based. It's frequency-based. It's what vibe are you putting out? What resonance are you putting out? Versus, the carbon-based old school model or old world view is that we evolve. But with this new school idea is we start to look at, potential expressions and interactions, not only with the environment, but, with our consciousness. And so in the past few years, you have this new kind of idea and field thought about epigenetics. And epigenetics is really simply, and there's also this group called Heart Math, but their focus is sort of how consciousness influences reality. Now, there's the question, which I'm not too sure of where I land on, and the question is, well, does consciousness affect the physical reality of neurotransmitters, of chemical reactions and things, which, the folks that are kind of leaning towards the epigenetics says, yes, it does. We can influence what we thought was a tried and true. It's a physical thing. It's a rock. Our consciousness is not going to change the rock. Now, some people are saying, no, with our physical bodies, our bodies are really malleable. They're adaptable. They change. So why wouldn't consciousness affect how we our physical biochemical state of being, of a health or illness? So there's that. And so basically the new school is saying, hey, we can use awareness and consciousness. We can use intent to change our physical presentation or the expression of our genomes, the expression of how our DNA works, which is kind of a physical thing. Now, on the really the metaphysical end of things, so we got metaphysics over here. We got, say, epigenetics here, and then over here is the experience of reality, which is very subjective. So metaphysics says, hey, we can influence physics, and there's the whole thought of entanglement, and entanglement is basically looking at, oh, well, the direction of the atom's spin is going to depend on depend on the observer. And so the observer, the presumption is the observer has consciousness, and by the mere looking or thinking about the spin of this atom, I may be incorrect technically, but basically it's that, oh gosh, I forget, split kind of thing. Anyway, it's generally in the realm of entanglement, which is a fascinating thing. Because if entanglement happens and is valid, well, that really opens us up to the idea that, hey, this fish over here can communicate with this fish over here by merely thinking about that fish. And when this fish, this little ego, thinks about this little ego can pick up that feeling across space and time. Space and time become kind of collapsed or compressed or condensed. And so to the point that, in a sense, space and time really doesn't matter. What matters is the thought of this little fish thinking about this little fish over here. And so then we get into the realm of metaphysics, of psychic experience, telepathy, and all that kind of stuff. And that's fascinating to me, because we have a lot of people now, doing channeling, doing energy reading, doing Reiki at a distance, doing quantum healing hypnosis at a distance via, a Zoom call, kind of thing. And I think that's like, wow, that's wild. 50 years ago, we would have never thought of that, or if people thought of that, there was very few people in the world that were thinking of that. And now we have this explosion that's on the internet that's like, it's like, you got to tune into that. But once you kind of tune into that sort of area of YouTube or the internet, there's a huge, deep amount of people there. Just like, oh, well, I think now I want to tune in to plumbing because I have a leak in my main line and I got to figure that out. Well, you can jump on YouTube and fix anything. And that's, we live in an amazing time where, in a sense, we're having the emergence of a multi-dimensional universe. So when you now have this fishbowl here, and you got another fishbowl like here that's filled with little fish, and then you have a fishbowl out here, that is full of fish, and this little green fish here can think about this little green fish in a completely different dimension, completely different space and time, but yet they're able to connect, and that's like, well, what is happening? And so I know this is, perhaps you're going, oh, what the heck, you're way off in the weeds. And yes, I admit. So one of the things with this whole consciousness thing, and you really have seen this since here in the United States, really since the 1940s, 50s, but then certainly in the 60s and 70s was an explosion of yoga, meditation. There's the old idea, I think back in the 60s and 50s, where the East came to the West, where, and it's basically the old word is the Oriental thought came to the Occidental environment. That's kind of old academic talk. But basically now, practically on every corner of, a reasonable sized city, you have a yoga, hold on, grab a drink of water. You have a yoga studio on every corner, and you have a coffee shop on the other on the opposite corner. So in 50 years, we've had this explosion of the whole moving towards more the metaphysical, more the meditative yoga thing, to improve wellness, well-being, to manage life better, and all that. And I think for me, behind that movement is really the discussion of consciousness and how self is involved in that. And so we've had this kind of, back in the 40s, well, I went to war, or I worked in a factory, or I worked in a farm, and I was involved in a community that was really pretty small, pretty insular. It kind of stuck to itself and all that. But now with certainly the internet, the explosion of TV, communications, of phones. When I was a kid, we had a party line. If somebody was on the line when you picked up to call somebody, well, oh, sorry, hung up the phone. Now, everybody has their own little, cell phone, which I'm shooting this video on, on a cell phone, and you have access to a world, a universe of information, whether you want to fix your toilet, fix your cat, oh, you just cut yourself and you don't want to go to the ER. Well, there's things like, medical super glue and all kinds of stuff. So let me get back to this. So in essence, the sense of self needs to be redefined or figured out to keep up with the expansion of our world, of our universe. So I'm going to switch metaphors here. So everybody, I think here, and if you're not, you kind of got to get out a little more. But everybody has access to movies, whether it's Netflix, Prime, all kinds of, I have no idea. But anyway, so with the movie metaphor, we watch a movie and we go, wow, that was a great movie, and so when you look at a little bit deeper dive into the movies, is that really there are several roles or things that need to be done, and it can be done by one person or rarely one person, just because making a movie is a huge thing. You look at the credits and it's like, oh my gosh, a small town of 10,000 people made this movie. But for the most part, to make a movie, you have to have a creator that thought of, hey, this is an interesting story, I want to tell the story. And so they, outline a plot, they do a script and all that, a basic kind of thing. And then they go and sell it to a producer. And the producer basically has the ability to finance the whole thing, to get other people excited about this story and say, yeah, I'll throw in, a few $1 million to, make this movie and get my name on the credits. So then, there's the producers. And maybe, I can be a producer too. I'm being a producer right now to this little YouTube masterclass. Then you also need a director to direct the scenes that tell the story of the creator. So now you have a director, and they're really like figuring out how to make the shots, how to do the scenes that tells the story in a manner which is going to be impactful. And so that's the director. Then you have the actor in the movie, which goes, oh, I'm the character, and there's some other characters in this movie to tell this story from different perspectives. And then lastly, you have the audience, which is you and me looking at this movie and go, wow, that's a great movie. Oh, yeah. Well, no, it kind of fell flat, you know. Uh, but really, the two main folks are the creator and the audience. Those are the two most important, because if you don't have the audience and you have the creator, well, okay, the creator created this wonderful thing, but if nobody's watching it, is it really a movie? Or the other way is, hey, I'd like to see a movie, but where's the creator? You know? And so where's the story? What's the plot line? What's the script? And so really the two essential pieces are the creator and the audience. And then, you know, the producer, director, and actors are sort of the subparts, the lesser parts in the movie theater, in the movie idea. So here's what the creator and the audience are the two main parts of the movie. And in this metaphor, you have life. So, in a sense, we can start to look at ourselves, our consciousness, whether we have an athletic body or not, or a disabled body, a body, you know, that my arm got cut off in a car accident. Okay, you can still be a creator. So the creator is really figuring out how to produce and direct and be an actor in life. And then we have this audience here who gets to enjoy this movie of life. Well, we are both the creator and the audience. Now, most of the time, what's being kind of presented and sold, whether you're taking a master class or, you know, you want to learn to make, you know, 7 figures in a month, or you want to become healthy and all this other stuff, or you want to figure out how to attract a wonderful mate that's going to be your soulmate for life, or $1 million, or you want to have a great kid that's confident, that knows how to do things, how to get their needs met. We're all talking about the creator aspect, okay? And the creator aspect is a thing that's very important to know and to figure out how to do. And part of what I'm doing in the Love, Change, Grow thing is I'm presenting a metaphor of love, change, grow, 3 simple words that really teaches this. I call it a master strategy for life. Because it's, I think, scalable, accessible, easy to learn, simple, intuitive, and elegant. So I'm not talking about that right now, but in relationship to the sense of self, this is the creator of your life, and figuring out how to do that is really important. I said that. But we also forget, we really don't talk about the audience. Well, who gets to enjoy the life that we created? Well, we do. Okay. Now, I know this seems a bit dumb, but the audience, there's a part of ourself that is the audience, and it's an important thing to understand. So, I'm going to erase this and let me get my little So, where was I? Here. So, oh, I know. So in my work of being a crisis consultant, crisis counselor, evaluator, you know, there's the person in crisis here with their going, oh my gosh, what's happening? Okay. And then there's me here who is like, okay, we got this, no problem. Okay. So this is a crisis person, and here's me. Okay. Now, I'm doing an interaction here. I got to pay attention face to face. I'm interacting here, and I'm focusing, creating this space for the person to go, oh my gosh, things aren't working well, so we get into that. Now, here's where the audience comes in. I am an actor and a director, a participant in this movie, okay? And I've learned the skills of, being educated and experienced and stuff of, hold on, my phone is ringing for some reason. Just disregard that. One of these impromptu, who's calling? So, in this space, there is one person that's the crisis, and there's me, okay? And I'm interacting. I really have to focus in and pay attention and create this space so that we can come to some resolution, some understanding. And we'll get at, in some other class, we'll do this piece. But there's also, I hope, there's another observer. Audience, A-U-D. You know what I mean. I'm a terrible speller. So as there's also in some careers and professions, you have to be able to attend to what's going on here, and yet also have a situational awareness or observational awareness up here that's looking down or looking around at this and going, what is happening? How can I be out here, observe, and what's going on, and how can I influence me here to do a better job, to be involved or not involved, and just be an observer and go, isn't that interesting? When this part of me does this, this person reacts a different way. So now, I realize in this whole discussion of discovering the new you, we've moved from a little ego here. We'll call this ego, E-G-O, ego me here has now also can become the observer of this whole thing. Now, it's not an either or. You can learn that really, in a sense, we are an onion, okay? And so this is me, and then this is my body, and this is my social self, body. Then, there's the role, and in here there's, my sex of either being a male or a female. And so when you cut the onion in half, you realize you can start to peel away these layers. And when you begin to peel away these layers, and you basically get down to this little person, okay, this little piece. What is that? What is that there? And how does this thing relate to this up here? Is there some kind of, you know, what is the deal? And what is interesting to me is when you get down to this little piece, this is just awareness, naked consciousness. We'll go NC for naked consciousness. And with naked consciousness, the interesting thing, you can look at naked consciousness as we are transformers of energy. So, I know this is two-dimensional, so hang in there with me. So, this little point of consciousness, this naked consciousness, you can look at that as a transformer of energy. So let's say, we have this little funnel here, and it's a funnel. And this is the stuff going in. So that could be food, that could be emotions, that could be thoughts, that could be literally everything that comes into a sunlight, love from another person, hate from another person, all kinds of stuff, comes into us. And because we have this ability to change and to be an observer at the same time, then we can, this is, here, input, and we can go like this, and this is called output. So whatever we absorb, gather, find useful, we bring into our conscious awareness here, and by our ability to cognate, to think of something new, to change, to think out of the box, in the box, however, we can then turn around and say, what do I want to put out? So this is output here, okay? Now, another way to look at this process is this is ego of what do I want? So you're gathering things. You're getting that wonderful new mate. You're getting that $1 million income. Okay, so you're getting all this stuff. You have all this stuff. You go, man, my life is great. It's cool. So there's a lot of people that are stuck. Let me erase some of this. So a lot of people are stuck right here. And so you kind of see, I kind of equate that with, you see a bunch of folks that have accumulated massive amounts of energy, of money, of influence. And that's this right here. Now, the question is, for me, that I wonder about is, what in the hell are they going to do about it? And so, in a sense, they've built a gilded bird cage. This becomes a cage of gold, a prison of gold, and they have figured out that way to make this happen. However, now the output is really beyond, over here is beyond ego, which is what can I share or give. So now the other part of this is, what can I put out there? What can I give? Because I think, this part of the equation of, this is the old school kind of thing. This is the old ego, is what can I get? And now we're kind of at this point on this planet that, we're kind of doing ourselves in, because we're amassing all this stuff. And now, or some of the people are amassing all this stuff, and the corporations and stuff, it's all about what can I get. Now, if we continue just to operate in here, we got a hell of a birdcage going on. So, with this idea of self be looking down on this observer goes, well, this equation isn't quite right. We are really transformers of energy, and now we got to go beyond the ego. And I saw this, I forget where it was, but I thought it was brilliant. It was we go. So now we got to go beyond ego is we go. And the thing is, after amassing and figuring out how to gather all this stuff, how do I get rid of it? How do I create the flow? How do I put out things back so that this output can be recycled or given to somebody's input? And there's their point of awareness, consciousness, and their transformers of energy, and so then they can do an output, and then that output goes to another thing, and so on and so on and so on. So from the idea of economic theory, the what is that called, is it volatility of money? No, that's not quite right. Anyway, it's one way to measure economic health is you spend $1, and that spending of $1 creates the ability to spend more dollars. It's called the velocity of money. Well, this is the same kind of thing, the velocity here, because if we get the money and just stop and hold it in here, there is no further velocity. But if we understand, we don't have to have, it's not limited to money. It's limited to all kinds of things. I mean, it can encompass all kinds of things. So you go from input to output to input to output to input to output. The velocity of the exchange has the potential to really create an abundance on this planet. So I'm not quite done yet. We're getting there. So with this idea, okay, we're transformers of energy. We have input, output, input, output. Okay, so I need a better way of doing this, but it works for now. need a lovely assistant to do this for me. But since I can both be the producer and lovely assistant, we're doing both. So this point of being the transformer of energy, TE, we'll call it transformer of energy, this spot here, this consciousness, okay, is really, we have a decision. And the decision is really an opportunity. Okay? And I don't remember where I came across this idea, and I know it's been with me for decades. I might have gotten it from my dad. But basically, you can look at planet Earth as being the school of free will. So on this planet, we have good, bad, light, dark, love, fear, male, female. So there's there's opposites. There's, positive and negative. Okay. There's always at least two options, the positive or the negative. And so when on this planet, in the school of free will, we can decide. Okay, now we can decide not to decide for a short while, but eventually we have to decide something. And if a person cannot decide something, they have basically analysis paralysis. They're basically frozen in time. They're frozen and not able to figure out something. And that's on one hand, you can say the option to not act, to not decide, is still a decision. And that's true. Okay, so in the school of free will, on this planet, the school of free will, we have opportunities to decide. And so this right here is where we decide. Okay, and with that decision, there's also, we can't forget about this observer person that is just going, hey, okay, that's a movie about decision. And so this is kind of like a Greek philosophical kind of thing. The Greek gods up here are the observers playing with the mere mortals. And so there's different plays, a tragic play, a comedy play, a play of romance and love and all that. And so the Greek mythologies, I think, I don't know much about them, but from what I kind of know a very, very tiny little piece, that's sort of basically taking this observer, the gods and goddesses up here, playing with the mortals and saying, hey, I wonder what they're going to decide, And so then, the mere mortals make a decision and then they get into all kinds of crap or not or whatever. And so, but for our purposes is learning to recognize consciousness here is really an opportunity to decide something. So what are we going to decide? What are we going to choose? Okay? And recognizing this observer self is really the witness, the witness of all this. And when we recognize both this and this are both part of ourselves, this is sort of like the universe. You and I. The source. Uh, this is sort of that space there, the universe, the source, or God, the piece of God, the observer. Okay? But we're on this planet and we're in school, so to speak, on how to become consciousness, how to become conscious and aware, how to recognize with awareness we have opportunities and we decide things, in the school of free will. That's kind of like, let's say, that's the meaning and purpose of being on this planet is to decide. So I want to wrap this up. This is going on a little longer than I had thought, but I think we're getting there. So in my mind, the winter solstice is really the time to discover yourself. And when we kind of figure out all this stuff that I've kind of put up on the board, then we realize we're, on one hand, this little individual self, this little individual ego self, but we have this huge opportunity. And the reason why I wanted to do this masterclass with winter solstice is on this planet, we have cycles, seasons, rhythms, we have the solar rhythm of the day, but we also have this thing called the lunar or the moon cycle, which is on this planet, there seems to be this metaphor, paradigm, this kind of axiom on this planet, this law, is that we change in cycles and seasons. And so in the winter, it's about going inside, looking at ourselves, asking ourselves basically the three main questions is, who am I? What's my passion? And what do I want to do about it? And that's the being conscious, realizing it's an opportunity to choose who do you want to be, who do you want to become in this next growing cycle, in this next season, in this next year. And winter solstice throughout our human history for many cultures is kind of this unknown thing until you kind of become initiated into it, kind of been taught, oh, this is what this is about. And so this has been my attempt to kind of demystify the mystical kind of symbolism of a winter solstice. And so I just wanted to put this out to you. I think what I'm going to do, I'm going through a lot of changes, especially in relationship to this love, change, grow aspect. And I feel that, discovering yourself is really the key, and figuring out how this works is really the key to move on into the love, change, grow kind of life strategy. But this is what underpins that whole idea, is that we all come together and we have a choice to make. We have an opportunity to make. And really, when you dive down deep and you find yourself, you are really claiming, this is who I am. And in claiming that, you also are claiming your authority to say, this here, my consciousness, is what I have decided to do. This is who I am. Okay. And then the love piece is, you can get chased all over hell by your fears, demons, and anxieties, or you can choose to chase your dreams, your passions, and joys. That's a choice. That's an opportunity. So, as I continue on in the Love Change Grow strategy, master strategy kind of thing, which I will continue to do some master classes and deeper dives into that. I think this here, the winter solstice, finding, discovering yourself, getting, figuring out what the ego is, the mask and the roles and all that, and really figuring out, we're kind of like this consciousness. We're a point of transforming energy, and in that we have a great opportunity, a great responsibility to determine what are we to become? How are we going to play on this world? How are we going to collaborate? Because I think if we continue with that piece of just gathering things and not sharing, is we can see we're in trouble in some respects. And so I feel, the new wealth is sharing. And I wrote a piece on is love the new money. It's a huge long piece, but it's basically comes to the conclusion that sharing is the new wealth. So that output, what we give, is going to create the velocity of wonderfulness. Okay, so there you have it. Thanks for hanging in with me. And again, this is Tim at Love Change Grow. All right, see you next time. Love you guys.